The leadership landscape has changed. And my question for you is, how are you showing up for your career? How are you showing up in business? How are you showing up for your team? Even if you don't have the title of leader, the reality is there's such a thing as self-leadership. And we're going to be talking today all about leadership in your career, in your business. And we're going to be talking specifically about how you can lead yourself first so that you can lead others in your organization as a result. We're going to be talking about how leadership has changed. We're going to be talking about the principles that have stayed true and will continue to stay true. And we're going to be talking about how you can build yourself into an incredible and into an extraordinary leader for 2022. If you're new to the broadcast, you know that there's only one fee for watching this show. There's no ads. There's no sponsors. We're not going to waste your time with that. All we ask is when you take away a piece of value during the conversation today with Megan Robinson, the leadership expert, share this show with one person who could use it the most. If you take away new insights, new realizations, maybe even if we energized you for the morning or we made you smile, share this show with one person because you're the reason that this show has grown exponentially over the course of the last 8 months. You're part of the team and we need your help. And we're here to give you exactly what you need to become the best leader that you can be. So without further ado, let's talk to our expert today, Miss Megan Robinson. And for those who don't know Megan, Megan is the principal at eLeader Experience. She works with individuals and teams to develop self-leadership skills that grow companies. She started her career in marketing, climbing her way through the corporate ladder at advertising agencies and Fortune 500 companies. Like many of us, she caught the entrepreneur bug and started her own marketing company. In addition, she's the president at ATDG, the leading learning and development organization in Chicagoland. And inspired by her own successful career in corporate and entrepreneurial environments, Megan makes leadership approachable for everybody, regardless of their title, their position, and their experience. Megan, it is an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Brandon. I am so excited to be here. I love talking leadership, and there's no one better to do it with than you.
And I think we met a couple months ago, just for everyone to have some background here.
Mhm.
And I was talking to, I believe it was Tony P who introduced me to you. And was it Tony? Just correct me if I'm wrong.
It was Dan, but he's in
Oh,
the Tony P circle. I was
Tony
just looking it
introduced
up.
me to Dan. Dan introduced me to you. It was like a whole chain of introducing. And I said that I loved meeting and talking to interesting people. And he's like, I know exactly who you need to talk to. She's the expert in leadership. She's high energy. He's like, she reminds me a lot of you. And I was like, ooh, I got to talk to her. And we had a conversation. And you have quite the colorful background, like in the corporate world, the entrepreneurial world, the training world. So I'm curious, how did you transition from the corporate world to the entrepreneurial world? And specifically, what enticed you in the world of leadership?
So the first transition for me was from agency to entrepreneur. And I really looked at marketing agencies and what I was doing, loved it, very passionate about it, but I didn't really see it as a sustainable model. And I looked at my future and I was like, okay, there's no one, really in their 50s around me. I love marketing and advertising, but how am I really going to continue on this career directory in a way that makes sense for me and aligns with my values and what I want out of life? And so I took that entrepreneur jump. I always love making my own experiences, and I really believe that you create your own magic. And so I started with email marketing. And I'm a big, everyone that knows me is like, what? Email Megan, newsletter Megan? Yeah, email's not dead. I feel like I'm the only millennial that used to work in like snail mail and really is passionate about email, but I am. And I looked at something that I could do soup to nuts and where a lot of my skill set was. But through that, I was white labeling for another agency. And white labeling, I was just contracting for them, or that was the fancy name they put around it because we're marketing, right? You got to make it sound fancy.
Yeah.
And about 3 months into that stint, one of the co-founders unexpectedly passed away. And I know we're bringing the energy a little bit down, nothing like death to really intrigue
Right?
the audience. But I watched a team of collaborators, truly everyone was a contractor, pull themselves together and really say, okay, we believe in this mission, we believe in the vision of it. How can we make this happen and really muster through this really challenging time? And so that was really my big step into leadership, where I ran projects and ran small teams, but all of a sudden it was really, we've got someone that's completely incapacitated, someone that's out of the picture, and a bunch of people wanting to do good and help. So I really stepped into leadership there. And when I was closing the chapter of the marketing and sales agency, really looked at that journey, looked at how does anyone become a leader or a manager, and just seeing this huge, terrifying gap where I experienced it a lot myself. And I know a lot of my friends don't feel like leaders, aren't sure if they want to step into it, see what the responsibility is, and it's overwhelming because we don't have a lot of good role models out there, unfortunately. There's a
Mhm.
lot of terrible leaders and managers, and we want to do better. So as we see younger generations stepping into leadership and management, giving them that support and that inspiration and that guidance really was where I found my footing and passion.
You know, I'm really curious during that time where you had to step in when the owner was incapacitated or when they died at this point, right? What was the biggest shift that you had to personally make in that transition that most likely just happened like all of a sudden?
Um, yeah, that was the major shift for me. One, when I started my own company, I was like, "I'm done playing with B and C players. I'm gonna do this all on my own." And I kinda shunned that leadership, but when that happened, it was about the emotional intelligence that needed to just skyrocket. And how do I bring that personal side and that professional side together? Because it was an environment where crying is okay at work all of a sudden. There was a lot of emotions. They were business partners and life partners. So it was a really big transition. Being the person to comfort people and having that balance and that empathy really was something that lacked before. I had that very traditional, oh, business is business and home is home, and you don't
Mhm.
mix the two together, and you should be able to get over it, and there's no feelings in business. And really see that come together in a way and look at people different and feel comfortable doing so. Huge shift for me.
It's so funny how, like, because I was the same way. It's so funny how we think that emotions and feelings are separate from business when business is literally emotion and feelings. Like, that's where all of it stems from because I mean, we make decisions emotionally and then we back those emotional decisions up with logic. I remember when I first became a leader, I was not thrown into it because like I applied for the role and I was performing the role as a leader before I got the title of a leader, which is something I definitely want to talk about with you. And I had no idea what I was doing once I got the role. Like there was no formal training like okay, this is how you effectively lead. Like I understood the responsibilities, but there really aren't a lot of people out there teaching people how to be a leader because leadership is such a topic that encompasses so many different things. And I know you have like your wheel of principles that all of them are so important, especially the emotional intelligence. So when you made that transition,
Yeah.
how did you improve in this topic? Because like yeah, there's books about emotional intelligence, like it's such a vast field in itself. How can one improve in their emotional intelligence? But how more so, how did you do it?
Um, Great question. What I love you said earlier, and I do want to touch on it later, is there's not a lot of people teaching leadership. And I
Mm.
think that it's the model that we think where we can learn something or we can pick up a book and all of a sudden we're a great leader. And it's how you're internalizing it and it's who you want to become with that. So you've got to have a different drive and motivation. It's not an engineer, oh, I can just learn all of these equations and now I'm an engineer. You can't learn a bunch of equations and become a leader.
Mhm.
You've got to be able to practice them. So for me, especially the emotional intelligence side, it was really bringing up that awareness. I focus a lot on that self-awareness and self-management. Half of emotional intelligence is all about you. So the more comfortable you are with yourself, the more aware you are on what emotions are affecting you, how you're responding to something, the easier it is to be there for other people and to really manage that situation or come to it with a certain sense of emotional intelligence. So I was thrown into it pretty quickly. I had to definitely take a step back, a lot of deep breaths, and even be honest with people of like, hey, this isn't a skill set of mine, or this is an uncomfortable place for me. And just take that breath and be there. And most of the time, and I'm sure you see it with coaching too, it's not about what you're bringing to the table, it's about being there for the other person and giving them the space to express their emotions or to work through those emotions and letting that happen organically really gave me a lot of ability to rise to that occasion. So I had to break this news to over 20 people, over 50 people, I think. So because I was finding the CRM and calling a bunch of clients saying, "Hey, this is what we're the situation that we're in right now. Things are going to be a little delayed," and everything was very sudden. So unfortunately, that actually happened twice in 18 months. So
Wow.
I got, I don't want to say good at notifying people, but it's been kind of a wild ride on that one, but it definitely raises it.
You said something very important that we cannot skip on, which you said it very quickly and you said it like as if there wasn't a lot of significance behind it, but there is a lot of significance behind you saying that you had to sometimes, quote unquote, admit to people that you were new to this. You didn't know exactly how to do this, right? I see a lot of new leaders. So, for just to give you some background, for 3 years, I was the director of leadership development for a large sales company in upstate New York.
Mhm.
And I was one of my roles was to bring these new leaders through a form of boot camp, which I now do for the public, not on leadership, but specifically on life. But back then it was only leadership. And a lot of these new leaders, as soon as they were able to put this title in their email signature of sales team leader or area sales manager, they immediately like their chest went out, their voice got deeper. And it's like, what's going on here? And they were so afraid to let people know that they didn't know exactly how to do something. And I found that the most effective leaders and the ones who stayed in leadership for the long run were those who could put their ego aside as much as possible to let other people know I don't always know what I'm doing, right? I'm new to this. I'm learning too. Like, was it difficult for you to put that ego aside? And how often do you run into this problem per se of ego in the workplace and in businesses?
Um, how often everything is driven by ego. I used to do, a lot of marketing research and a lot of thinking about clients and customer behavior, and ego always comes up as a motivating factor for purchasing decisions, for whatever you're doing. It is constantly there. I think you're talking about that leading with vulnerability too. And
Mm.
I'm sure are both Brene Brown fans, and she's got some fabulous work on that. Like that's an easy one to just read her stuff. It's incredible. But that wasn't the biggest lesson on leading with vulnerability and really being able to admit to what you don't know as much as what you do know. That collaborative experience, I think, is so critical for a leader. And to not have, and especially younger leaders coming into it, when you get that title, you think you should know more and you should have all the answers. And the biggest thing is not having all the answers. And that is so much more important than just rattling off, because it's that box checking, it's that teacher raises the hand, you want to say the thing, someone asks you a question, you give them an answer, you are on fire, right? Like that feels good. But admitting when you don't, or even when you do know it, taking those extra steps and letting other people come up with those answers, way more powerful. Do you have time for a quick story about this?
Please. Yeah.
So, you mentioned ATD Chai, the talent development organization. I am president for all of 11 more days, and then Kirsten is going to be president, and she is fabulous. But I jumped into that position very, very quickly. I actually joined the association this year. It was my 2021 goal to be on a board. And so through a series of unfortunate events, and we'll say fortunate ones, they had a leadership challenge, and I stepped into the president role. And everyone was like, who in the world is this person? Why is she stepping in? Long story short, 75% of the executive team had actually walked off the board by the time I stepped in. So let's face it, there just wasn't anyone left, really. It wasn't like, oh man, I'm gunning for it. Let me take this. It was, there is a serious challenge. There is something that needs to happen, and I am willing and able to step into this role. And with something like that, I have no history of it. I have not led this organization before. It is one of the largest chapters in the country. And I led with vulnerability like you wouldn't believe. It was a really important lesson too of you don't have to have the answers to lead. I had a whole team of people that had the answers. They weren't ready to step up to that leadership role, but every single one of them, no one expected me to have the answers. And I was like, guys, I'm not going to have the answers. I don't know what we've done before. I'm going to make the best decisions I can, but I'm going to call a lot of people to make sure to know what I'm missing. I started a lot of conversations like, tell me what I don't know. Tell me what I need to know in order to navigate this. What am I missing here? Here's something that we want to do. What do you guys think we should do? And really being in that spirit of collaboration, in that spirit of transparency, but still being able to give enough direction and guidance and take that responsibility for the success and failure. It's been a hell of a year, but we've had a lot of fun, and we've done some incredible work that team wouldn't have been able to do without it.
Wow, well said. And congratulations on your role in the board and all the twists and turns that came along with it. That's super cool.
Thanks.
You know, I love everything you said, because it's one thing for someone to just become the leader and they become the man or they become the woman who takes charge and just knows exactly what to do. But it's another thing when you're able to garner buy-in by them seeing you grow at the same time. When I say them, I mean those who you're leading. It's a whole different animal when you're able to take a team of people and they get to see how you grow in the process. Like, I remember the first time I even gave a presentation to the team that I was leading when I became a sales team lead. I was so nervous. This was before Toastmasters. I literally remember getting up in front of the team of it was like 14 people, and my hands were shaking. My voice was wavering. And I literally said, guys, I'm just going to be real with you. I'm really nervous right now to talk to you guys. And they're like, Brandon, you talk to us every single day. Like, why are you nervous now? They're like, just say what you need to say. And when they said that, I was like, wow, like I'm really just thinking about me, right? And my problems and my ability to do this, when really I need to place my focus and my thoughts on them. And throughout my growth journey, they grew as a result, because I, in a sense, was their role model. What do you think is the importance of, as a leader, having your own role model and having other leaders you can look up to? Like, what role does that play when you're working with companies and organizations?
I'm going to flip it, not necessarily to role model, because I think I prefer to create your own vision. And I think role models do create a certain picture and something that you admire from them. So taking it a step further and thinking, what is it about this person that I admire? What are the traits, the behaviors, the attitudes? Taking those pieces to create your own leadership vision. This is what I do want to look like as a leader. And you can, borrow or steal or, Frankenstein all of those pieces together. And that's where I think you really create that picture of what does it mean to be a great leader for me? What is aligned with that or not aligned with that vision for it?
Is that one of the first things that you work with people on, like when they're stepping into that role of leadership, to really define their traits, values, and attitudes?
I call it mission, vision, and values. Those typically, and I always start with organization when I'm working with organizations and teams. I'm finding with the organization's mission, vision, and values, as well as the individuals' mission, vision, values, because
Mm.
you're always able to find a bridge and connect the two together. And that's actually the secret sauce to employee engagement.
Wow, very cool. I like how you define both the company's mission, vision, values, and then the individuals see how they bridge to each other, work together, complement each other. Just to even take a step back, what organizations do you typically love to work with and work with the most?
Yeah. I love to say 50 to 500 employees. And I know that's kind of a weird way to define those companies and organizations, but that's where HR is drinking through a fire hose. They're going through such major growth changes. I mean, when you jump from 50 employees to 100 employees, that feels like a totally different company. And what the leadership needs to do and what the employees need to do changes very dramatically. And so for a lot of what my work is, it's that personal professional development that really helps people transition through it, but find their own place. Um, I've worked in the really large companies, right? And sometimes they have leadership training, sometimes they don't, or management training more so, particularly on the smaller ones. If you're in a company 200 or less, you are getting promoted because you are hungry and you probably took that company because you wanted to find the next step, because you knew you'd be able to grow quickly. But there's no support in what that looks like.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people get promoted because they're good at the job they're in. They are not necessarily prepared for the job they're stepping into.
Well said. I say well said because it's so true. Like I come from that world, and
Yeah.
it's almost as if leadership training is seen as an afterthought. And we focus so much on training the team, but the leaders themselves they have conferences where they come and talk about what's going well, what we need to improve in, but there's maybe a 45-minute segment every quarter. This is how you be a great leader. Right? Like, why do you believe that to be so, that leadership training is an afterthought for these organizations?
It is so hard to put it together. There was a study that, interviewed 150 different CEOs, and they asked them, what makes a great leader?" And they got 150 different answers. I mean, there's no standard for it. It's not as measurable as other metrics, but we all know how powerful it is. So it feels a little elusive. Everyone has their own definition of it, and I think as we're evolving just as a society, we look at leaders differently. What it took a Roman leader to be a great leader is very different than the attitudes and beliefs of what today's leader, even Churchill, fantastic leader. But I was reading his biography because I actually did, and
Mm.
it's very long and very dry and a lot of war memories. Um, but just looking at, how he treated people or what that looked like, that would not fly in today. Even Steve Jobs, I think, has a hard time being relevant today with how he led. So those are constantly shifting. And so it gets the short end of the stick. And I believe that leadership isn't something that you can just pick up in 45 minutes. It's something that does take a lot of dedicated time, but it also takes you wanting it. Someone asked me, "Can you really, create a good leader? Is it something that you're born with?" And I had to pause and think and say, "No, you can develop those skills, but you have to want to develop those skills." And if you're at a big conference, not everyone wants to be a great leader, and that drive and that motivation and that desire is so critical to step into it.
And, I've seen that exact thing in a lot of different sales teams where they don't have a leader and they keep saying things like, when I say they, I'm talking about upper leadership.
Yeah.
They say, we need, I think Joe would be perfect for this role. He does this, he does that. He's the guy that we need in this. He's the top in sales, which means he'd be the greatest leader. And Joe doesn't even want to be a leader. And they ask him and they're like, "Can you do this for us?" And he's like, "Well, I don't really want to do this. I like, working 4 days a week or whatever it is." Right. And they're like, "Well, we need your help." It's always, not always, but 90% of the time, it's a recipe for disaster because you've got somebody in the role who doesn't even really want to be in the role. So they're immediately half-assing things, but it's not even his fault because he was kind of just placed there. He didn't want to disappoint people. And you know, we've said the word leader a lot during this conversation, and we've said the word manager only a few times. But a lot of the times, as you know, people, the word manager to other people can even be synonymous with leader. And I don't believe that to be the case. And I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are, because I didn't even ask you what is a great leader, but maybe you can kind of unpack that by explaining what is like the biggest difference between a manager and a leader.
Ooh, I love that. Managers are there to follow process and to keep things the same. Right? You always have a manager and they've got their tools and their resources and they keep on trugging along and they're maintaining status quo. Leaders are there to change. They're about creating change. They're about creating something bigger and different. And so there's a point where there's a push and pull between management and leadership and the maintenance and keeping everything humming along and people that want to inspire and grow and do something different.
Do you believe that there should be both leaders and managers, or can leaders be the manager, or do you believe that they should stay separate as different roles?
I think that every great leader needs to have some management abilities. And the biggest reason for that is accountability. And I was talking with someone else, especially, you know, entrepreneur leaders, where they're trying to manage all of these pieces while simultaneously setting a vision for the future. And you can't be in one place all the time. You've got to be able to flex for both.
Well said. I agree completely. Do you believe that there should be a role that isn't focused on leadership, but is simply focused on the processes themselves?
Ooh, only if that person knows how to be collaborative. And
Mm,
what I will say with that is it takes a great leader to set an incredible vision so that those two people are aligned.
that's fair.
Because
Yeah.
if you're setting processes, you are so stuck, and we all know the people that just put their blinders on, like, "Nope, this is what I was told to do, and this is what I'm doing, and I need to fill out form blah, 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 blah," and they're never incorporated when things change, and they get outdated. And that's terrible because they have so much ability and power and support that they can and value that they can add, but they haven't been aligned to what that new vision is. So, if you're able to bring those people along, they help you with the minutia. They tell you what the processes need to be changed. So I actually believe with vision building, it is 80% the leader's responsibility, right? You are crafting a vision. It is not 100%. I'm sure you're familiar with the 80-20 principle,
Mm,
right?
mhm.
That 20% is for the rest of the team. It's for those managers because when you combine that extra 20% where they're able to give feedback, they're able to align to that vision, they're able to tweak it, now you have their buy-in. So that 20% so incredibly powerful. But that's the piece that gets missed. Most leaders want to come in, craft a vision, drop it on the team and bounce. And without having that collaborative, integrated approach, conversation about it that's going to push it further and leaving your ego out of it, you'll
Yeah.
come up with something that's even more powerful and stronger.
I think it was in Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, where he says, like, one of the greatest laws of influence is not like you're manipulating people, but make your idea seem like it's their idea, or at least have the buy-in on your idea. Because if you don't, it's going to be very hard to lead people into an arena that they want nothing to do with. And I love what you said about collaboration because it's so true. And even if you don't have that separate role for, you know, processes and operations, and I feel that it depends on the team and the size of the company and if the resources are possible for that to even be a thing. But I remember it was me and my partner Sean Miller working together for this leadership team and training team. And what I was great at, he was not great at. But what his zone of genius was not mine. He was analytical. He was more processes, and he was more one-on-one. where I was like the front man. I loved speaking to the groups. I loved the training portion. I loved creating the trainings, and I would run all my ideas past him and he'd run all his ideas past me. And together we were able to collaborate and put our egos aside as much as possible. Not always, but as much as possible. And we were able to get more done than 5 normal people could do because we were 2 fully tuned in workhorses who just collaborated so freaking well together. So I love what you said because I agree with it 100%. Now, you said earlier that you create your own magic. And I wanted to touch on it then, but we got taken in a different direction, which is completely cool. But I want to talk about it now specifically because I had my zone of genius and my partner Sean had his own zone of genius. We, in a sense, created our own magic, right? So I'm curious if that's the way that you talk about magic. Like, what does that mean as a leader to create your own magic?
I will say it's really taking full responsibility and accountability for your environment and for your situation. I won't go into the whole, attitude or thinking is believing, but it's truly kind of that tenet of everyone has a lot of opportunity, and I won't go into opportunity here, but you can really create the situation you want to be in. You take control, responsibility for your actions, your beliefs, your emotions that are feeding into it, and really looking at situations through the lens of what do I want it to be and how can I create that? When I was very early, I remember coming back home from my first semester at college for Christmas, for holiday season, and some of my friends were not having a great time at college, and some of them were having an amazing time. And I looked at the ones that weren't having a great time, like, how in the world can you not be having a great time? You like all of these things are available. Like colleges do an incredible job, or universities, at really putting together all of the resources you could possibly need. You are surrounded by people your own age in the same situation. How are you not making friends? How are you not out there finding the right people that you want to connect and engage with? And so it was really at that point that I was like, wow, you are really choosing not to do that. So there's a lot of power of choice. And we're very fortunate to have that. So it happens in leadership, it happens in organizations and cultures where I believe a lot of people want to blame, especially now with Great Resignation, blame an organization's culture. Like, oh, it wasn't a good culture fit, or oh, they, didn't align with that. Like, no, no, no. How did you contribute to that? How did you evolve that culture so that it does work for you? And really taking a couple of those steps. So I think that we all have a lot more power than we give ourselves credit for, and we can take a lot more responsibility for our successes and challenges.
Ooh, I love that. Not everyone loves that though. Not
No.
everyone's gonna like hearing that. They're like, no, it was the company. And I cannot tell you how many people. I come from sales and the turnover is like very high, right? It's like over 30-40% at times. And a lot of people leave and they go to a different sales company and they come back and it's literally like a running joke, which probably isn't, it's probably toxic a bit in itself, but it's like, well, I'll see you when you come back, right? And they're like, oh, well, don't say that, right? And but so many of them do, because a lot of people, especially the type that we're talking about here, and I used to be one of these people, by the way. I'm not like talking down. I'm not judging. I'm observing and repeating my own experiences at times, especially in my early 20s before I even became a leader. I thought that the grass was greener on the other side, right? And I was someone who actually, the company I worked for was a retailer for Verizon Wireless, and I was going to go to AT&T, right? It's like the ultimate move is to leave them and go to them, right?
Traitor.
And I was hired and I had the plane ticket to literally go out to training. And my leadership at the time exhibited extreme leadership skills by literally traveling several hours to come sit down with me and say, Brandon, we think you're making a big mistake here. It was before I got married. And they're like, you have a wedding to pay for. You're earning this much here. You're not going to make nearly that much there because we're 100% commission. AT&T is not. And they said, we think you're making a bad move. If we didn't think so, we wouldn't have driven 2 hours to come see you. And they pretty much instilled the idea that it was my fault that I was in the place that I was in, but I was not taking ownership at that time until a mentor, and this is why I asked you the role model question, a mentor of mine who was my leader at the time took me under his wing, gave me his time, and helped me to lead myself. And he helped me with my fitness. He helped me with my finances. He helped me gain the respect of the team by helping me become more emotionally intelligent. And once I took ownership, like you just said, my entire life changed. I stayed with the company, stayed with them 7 more years as a result of this. And if I didn't, I don't know if we would have gotten the house. I don't know if we would have gotten married. Maybe I would have, done well there. Who knows? That was a whole different path. But this idea of the grass is greener where you water it is so powerful. And it's something that needs to be talked about more, because a lot of people think that fate is a thing. And whatever someone believes, it's what you do in terms of your efforts that will determine your destiny inside of a organization, in a relationship. If you want to improve your relationship, improve you first and do that for a bit and see if that changes anything. And if it doesn't, then maybe it's not the best relationship, but you have to focus on you first. Would you say that that's one of the things that you focus on mostly with leadership, is helping them to take this form of, like Jocko Willink says, extreme ownership?
I love extreme ownership. I do love that sense, and you are 100% right. That's why I call it self-leadership. You've
Mm.
got to be able to lead yourself first before you're able to lead others.
And what does that process look like, to lead yourself first? How do you help leaders to begin this process, especially emerging leaders?
Yeah. I really focus on 4 different pillars of self-leadership. And I find that most leadership challenges and successes can be tracked back to one, if not all of them. So I focus a lot on vision building, goal setting, building self-awareness skills, emotional intelligence, and communication. And all of those areas, you can take that extreme ownership. You can own it yourself, take the responsibility on how you want to improve it, how you want to evolve it, and build up those skills. And then you're able to share that with others. And I think an abysmal amount of CEOs and leaders that actually lead by example. And this do as I say, not as I do, doesn't work. You and I both know it doesn't cut it. It doesn't ever work. And so taking that responsibility, being willing to be the first person and to show and model what it is that you're looking for from the team, you've got to be able to do it yourself first.
Out of those 4 pillars, in today's landscape, with the way things are now, what have you found is the one that needs the most work in organizations, or is it truly different for each one?
They feed into each other is the hard thing. So, I will say communication is
Mm.
constantly a conversation that I'm having. But it's really hard to have effective communication if you don't have a vision for where you want it to go or what success looks like. Or if you try and communicate without emotional intelligence. I actually drew back a little and I was like, "Ooh, don't do that." But that communication, that ownership of, is someone else, um, are you taking responsibility for your ability to communicate? Are you making sure that the other person is understanding wholly and completely? Are you really clear with setting that out? Has been a lot of conversation. And I always joke, because, we're still kind of pandemic times and work from home revolution.
Mhm.
Pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, a lot of these things were broken in organizations, right? It's not they had bad communication, they had bad visions. Post-pandemic, or as we moved into this new landscape, those things are just exacerbated. They're just exponentially worse. So it's shining a giant spotlight on what's already broken. But tenets of great communication, great emotional intelligence, those are the same. Work from home, in person, across generations, those basic fundamental skills and abilities, critical at all levels.
Yeah, I love that. I do agree that they all feed into each other. The reason I ask is because when I was first working on myself in order to even take that step into leadership, I I like your 4 pillars because they relate to what I talk about with life, right? I've talked about the 5 key areas of life, your emotions, your physical body, finances, relationships, spirituality. If one is off completely, than it's going to impact all the other ones. And I generally always say to people, because they're always like, well, where do I start? Like, should I do all of them at once? And it's like, I wouldn't recommend it, because then you're going to be completely spread thin. I think it's different for everyone. And I feel that, and I completely agree with what you said on communication too, because especially with people working from home, virtual communication and virtual leadership is it's a different skill entirely. And some things, complement each other, but it's a different skill entirely to lead people from a computer screen, from Zoom, from a conference call, than it is to actually be in the place of business with them. But for me, it was my fitness. Like, I was 60 pounds heavier. I was unhealthy. I had by 3 p.m. my energy was like done. Once I got home, I didn't have energy for my fiance at the time and for my family. And I focused on that one area. And by focusing on that one area, it improved all the other areas. And I'd have to agree that by focusing on communication, it's going to improve them all. But if you don't, like you said, though, if you don't have a vision, then what are you going to communicate about?
Yeah.
Right. So I agree that they are different, but similar in that way.
I typically, it's great that you found something for you to really, get some of those wins and that would create the biggest impact for you. I find oftentimes vision building is kind of that first step that you've got to know where you want to go, what you want to be. Sometimes, like we were talking before about role models, I ask people, do you have a role model, or who do you know of that has great leadership, or leadership that you admire, is typically how I phrase it. Be surprised how many people don't.
Wow.
It's just like, I can't think of anyone. I can't think of a boss I've ever had that I really admired. And I've had to turn to TV or movies. I'm like, who is a fictional character that you admire, right? Like, let's put some rules, but creating that vision of where you want to go with it, and even with the fitness aspect, you had a picture. You're like, okay, I need to lose 60 pounds. That's what that looks like. I know how I want to feel at that point. I know what I want to look like at that point. I know what I'm eating and who I am at that point. And it really gave you that picture to keep you on track.
Yeah. All I knew was something had to change. And I had no choice at the time except to change, because I was, like I said, I was literally about to move to a different company. I thought it was them, not me. And a lot of companies right now are in that same situation, like the Great Resignation. They might be losing people. They might have had to lay off people. Like, there was that whole thing about the company laying off like tons of employees over a Zoom call, and they got all the LinkedIn polls like, was this the right thing to do? And it's like, obviously not. Stop trying to get engagement through a LinkedIn poll. But like, just being real, right? But companies are facing this problem of leadership and a lack of a leadership program and processes. And I know that you have your leadership experience, the emerging leaders experience. And I want to talk to you about what that looks like and who it's for. So can you give us, like, first, who is this experience for, and what is the outcome of this?
Yeah. So this is for what I like to call the emerging leader. And in some sense, we're all emerging leaders when it really comes down to it, because we're all evolving and growing. But I always lovingly and jokingly say the pesky millennial. And that's okay, because I am a millennial myself. And whenever you throw out that M word, there's like a visceral response. But typically it's the mid-level managers, it's the high potentials, high performers that want to step into leadership. It's all the way up to the directors who are really looking to evolve and focus and hone and be intentional about their leadership skills. And what we do, it's a group coaching cohort style. So once a month, we'll do a 2-hour deep dive as we spend time on each one of those 4 pillars I mentioned earlier. And then we do weekly assignments and activities. So you do some deeper reflection. You really start putting things into practice and start using the information and start playing with it. And then finally, I do weekly office hours. And we all know that things happen way too quickly. So, like, once a month training is not doing anyone enough to really start to move the needle. So, that's why we do those weekly office hours. So, we're always touching base. You really have that access to a coach. You're able to get up to 4 hours of group coaching a month. And that support at whatever level you're transitioning into or you've just reached, it really helps to reposition and reframe and focus and elevate those leadership skills.
Wow. So That's a really cool program. So I like how you do the deep dive each month on each of the 4 pillars, right? But you go deep and you don't just do like a weekly, okay, now let's talk about vision, let's talk about communication. And then by the end of 6 weeks, it's done. And it's like, I'm a leader now. Like you actually do the monthly dive and then you really go deep with each of those in the 4-hour group coaching per month. So what does that look like? Do you host that virtually? Do you also do it in person? Is that you going deep in those 4 hours on that particular subject that you talked about for the monthly call? Like what does that look like?
I like to call it facilitated discussion, where I really want to have everyone bring where they're at with a topic, what's going on in their organization and team, what are their challenges. So if we're talking about communication, what's happening, what are the challenges in the organization, what's working, what's not working, and through what does great successful communication look like, what do you want more of, what do you think other people's perspective is, and really having those coaching questions to start that dialogue and get different perspectives. And then I'll introduce the principles or models or tools organically through it. So I'm not big on that like real strict education, here's what we're doing now. It's much more fluid. I like to call it flexible process.
Mm.
Which I think every entrepreneur is like, yes, don't tie me down, don't make me do one thing. But enough so that it organically comes up.
I love that. At the end of this program, what can businesses and these new emerging leaders expect to take away as the result?
Oh, they will elevate their leadership skills. They will feel more empowered. They will have more self responsibility, more accountability. They will be better communicators, and they will be able to show up in the way that they want to show up for an organization. And I always say it depends on the specific metric you want to measure, right? What is it? People don't leave businesses or organizations, people leave managers.
Mm.
And it's really my goal and vision is to make leadership more accessible and attainable because everybody needs to be a great leader. So at the end, and it is a full year-long program, you will have more of those leadership skills. You will be able to show up for your team differently, and you'll be closer to being a better leader.
Oh, freaking love it. And you know what's also cool about it? They don't have to launch this internally from their own people. They maybe in the future they could, but they're bringing you in who already has this tried and true method to get a specific result. They don't have to focus on the delivery. You take care of all of that. And especially in these times, that is so important. So what is a way that what's the best way for people to get a hold of you in order to talk more about this experience with you?
Yeah, my organization is called eLeader Experience, and it's at eleaderexperience.com. There is an application right on there if you are looking. I call them my hand raisers, the onesie twosie people that are like, me, let me in. We'll do the mixed cohorts. I've got a couple starting in January. And I'll be able to put them into that, but also for the organizations and teams, we can do dedicated programs for them. But definitely the website, eleaderexperience.com. I'm also found on LinkedIn, just focus on LinkedIn. That's where my primary area is. And then, of course, you can email me at megan@eleaderexperience.com.
Super cool. Everyone, links are in the description for each of those things. Many different ways to get a hold of Megan. So check out the links, get a hold of her, have a conversation to see if this will make sense for your organization and for your team. Heading into the new year, right now is the time to make big changes, and it's the perfect time. And Megan, the last thing I want to say to you is I commend you for your high levels of energy, your obvious passion for what you do, and for the real way that you want to serve these organizations to make a difference, because you know by serving them to make a difference, you're making a difference on the world as a result. Because these people who you help to become greater leaders are greater leaders in the organization, but they're going home to their families and they don't just throw those skills away when they get home. They're using those skills with their family and they're becoming better fathers, mothers, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters. Like it's improving their lives in every single area. And we didn't even talk about that, but it's a very important thing to touch on. So I commend you for that.
Thank you, Brandon. I commend you as well. The work we do, impacts every single facet. You don't turn a professional hat and a personal hat and a family hat. It is all interconnected, and you have such powerful and impactful lessons that you get to share as well. Thank you for the work that you do as well.
Well, I appreciate that. And I thank you for being on the show. And I look forward to next time. That was an awesome conversation about leadership, how leadership is changing, how it has changed, what you can do to emerge as a greater and more powerful leader for your team, your organization, and like we said, for your family, because it impacts every single area of your life. I love the energy Megan brings, and she'll bring that same energy to your business, your organization, and she will help you to make the difference that you are looking to make for your team. So the links are in the description to start that conversation with Megan. Again, if you found any value, which I know you did, share this show with just one person who needs to hear this information. Share it with another leader who you know that you know they work for a company that needs to incorporate this. Let's get this out to as many people as possible. Spread the word, because by helping each other, we'll help our teams and we'll create a better world and a more extraordinary world in the process. Thank you so much for watching the broadcast. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.